We continue our series of interviews with well-known public and political figures in order to better understand what is happening in Belarus and how the world reacts to it. Today our guest is the well-known Russian opposition politician Alexey Navalny. Alexey, glad to welcome you from the legendary Warsaw office. Glad that everything is in order with his Heya, glad to see a cheerful person. First question, is Alexey Navalny subscribed to Nexta? Thank you very much for calling me. I am glad to welcome your legendary Warsaw office from the German forest. I had to specially to another city to have the opportunity to talk to you, because everything is very bad with the internet, and of course I am subscribed to you. I am one of the huge number of your subscribers. You are doing a great job, you are great fellows, and we are watching carefully, because, of course, everything that Lukashenko does today is what Putin will do tomorrow. Therefore, in general, we carefully study all the technological methods that you are testing. When you came out of a coma and were already able to perceive information, what was your first reaction to the Belarusian events? This is a rather funny story, but to be honest, I do not remember it. I remember it rather in my wife's retelling. Because there was a period when I had already come out of a coma but had not yet out of bed and did not quite adequately perceive reality. And I can say, thank you very much to Lukashenko, because my first laugh associated with coming out of a coma was precisely thanks to him. My wife turned on this very tape for me, an intercepted conversation between some kind of Bill and Tom, between some Polish intelligence and the CIA, connected with my poisoning. She said that it was not clear at all whether I understood or not, but at some point I laughed for the whole room with a cheerful, joyful laugh. When I naturally began to think, in fact to think, of course, the first thing I did was to ask about what was happening in Khabarovsk and what was happening in Belarus. And what is happening in Belarus now? Is it a revolution? Is it an evolution of consciousness? Is it mass protests that have not led to anything yet? What is it? This is all together. Of course they have already led to everything. But listen, the most annoying thing is that now we have to hear about Belarus, but it's more likely not from Belarus, not from Belarusians, but in Russia. Many figures whine, well, how is it, my God, can you imagine, for 2 months now people have been walking and still have not achieved anything. But for 26 years, a person suited an authoritarian regime arranged it. Compelli controls the elections, Compelli controls television, courts. In general, absolutely everything. And what we see now is an absolutely amazing change that is happening, and it is absolutely impossible to turn it back and return to that point 4 months and a revolution is taking place in Belarus. A change of consciousness is taking place in Belarus. Probably, there is still a long way ahead, and there is definitely a long and difficult path ahead. But, to be honest, I am confident in the victory of the Belarusians, and I am absolutely delighted with all those people who take to the streets, who participate in strikes. I am delighted with the way the leaders act, Tikhanovskaya, and the resilience of those people who are behind bars. So for my part, I think an instant victory did not happen. Unfortunately, I would like to out once on the street and immediately win, but of course it can be a spiral. It is definitely not a circle, it is a spiral that ends up and there will be a victory at the top. We hope. We really hope. But if we talk about the synchronization of the protests in Khabarovsk, Minsk, Belarus and other cities, if it can be more global with protests, are these protests all the same? Because of 1 or 2 people, as it was in Khabarovsk, Fergal, in Belarus, Lukashenko? Or is it something more global, this dissatisfaction in general with the way events are developing in the world? Fatigue due to the pandemic. How to explain this? And now if you compare Khabarovsk and Belarus, I would not call it synchronicity of protests. I would call it rather synchronic leader madness. What is happening in Khabarovsk is an absolute lawlessness. What is happening in Belarus is some kind of lawlessness multiplied by 10. And protests are already a consequence. People do not want this and can no longer tolerate it at some point. Probably such a generational shift has a great influence here. It is absolutely obvious that a huge number of people are under 30 years old. And older too. But I think the overwhelming majority of those under 30 understand that there is absolutely no future in Belarus because of Lukashenko. Therefore, again, simply life itself pushes them out into the street, because people understand that participating in protests is the most important thing now. It is more important than Ing to work, it is more important than studying, it is more important than doing any deed, because your participation in the protest determines your future destiny. And with these leaders, there is no future. With Lukashenko and Putin, so we see the onset of this totalitarian madness, the offensive of people who do not care about everyone. So I want to remove Fergal, steal and take away, I will do it. I want to give a damn about Tikhanovskaya, fake elections and disperse everyone, beat them up, I'll do it. That is precisely why people come out to protest. This is not like the idea that S out into the street came to everyone's mind at the same time. No, people just react to the insanity of dictators. There is an opinion that the Kremlin supports Lukashenko in every possible way. How it does not quite love him, it is forced to. But if he sees some significant benefits for himself, concessions from Europe, maybe he will stop supporting the Lukashenko regime? Well, there is no opinion here. Putin certainly supports the Lukashenko regime. But I would say that it is wrong to think that Lukashenko is some kind of Putin's junior partner. On the contrary, Lukashenko is his older brother and daddy. Everything that Putin does in Russia, absolutely everything, he learned everything from Lukashenko and simply does it with a delay of 5 years. When they were still fined in Russia, they were imprisoned in Belarus for protesting. And then we applied it. All election fraud was taken from Belarus, the 3-day vote was taken from Belarus. An absolutely fantastic level of deception. Putin has always been a rather deceitful person. But he certainly learned to lie so desperately and dashingly from Lukashenko. And in this sense, I think that, of course, the Kremlin does not feel any particularly warm feelings there directly towards him, however, it is completely deadly for Putin if the Belarusians are now in a peaceful revolution, as we see, still able to remove him from power. Because for the whole of Russia it will be a signal of such hope. Because let's be honest, it seemed that a revolution would happen everywhere, but only in Belarus nothing would ever happen. And the fact that right now in a country where the maximum level of totalitarianism is, well, probably somewhere in Turkmenistan, even more on the territory of the former Soviet Union. But Lukashenko is undoubtedly one of the leaders. The fact that these events are taking place in Belarus is something terrible for the Kremlin, because they also implemented its scenario and now they saw that this scenario would lead to collapse and lead to a revolution of the most patient people in the world. And this is very bad for them. And whatever Europe promises, I don't think that somehow the Kremlin will deliberately surrender it. However, it is possible that when they already see that Lukashenko has surrendered himself, then they will take some action. By the way, they touched upon the nature of the Belarusian protests. They are really peaceful, no matter how the regime tries to show them so radicalized with the help of various provocations. Themselves they are already throwing Molotov cocktails. Do you share your admiration for such unusual Belarusian protests? Peaceful nature, the role of women, social coverage of students, pensioners and disabled people, the absence of any leaders because everyone is sitting. Is it really a unique phenomenon in your opinion? This is a truly unique phenomenon. Any protest is absolutely unique. Some parallels can be drawn, but what is happening in Belarus is unique, firstly because it happened, and secondly, you quite rightly said that the role of a woman is really very important and fundamental. I think that if it were not for this catalyst in that amazing cocktail that happened a few months the leaders were arrested, a new vote, great fatigue, a drop in living standards. But the catalyst was probably the 3 same women who behaved absolutely amazingly brave. This would never have happened. I am therefore, yes, of course delighted. Listen, I am delighted with any people who out into the streets to defend their freedom, especially since it is really dangerous to do it in Belarus. And those people who take part in strikes. This is really amazing. Nevertheless, generals of power structures, judges, riot police literally revel in their impunity. And they hope, apparently, that this power is eternal and they will not be punished forever. In fact, what does world practice say to this, and can such crimes unpunished at all? I do not think they are counting on it, of course. Well, there is simply no other way out. And what solution is there when you have already beaten these people once? And now yours, as I understand it today, the dismissed Minister of Internal Affairs is a completely insane person. This is a real criminal terrorist. His place in prison is simply, he is already fighting for his life. Of course, they understand that this cannot be forever, but they are doing everything possible, and in a sense they have already been seized by such a degree of despair. They also see that the country is getting out of control. Yes, from the formal point of view of the former, the courts are behind them, the television is behind them. The protesters were not allowed into the offices, but the streets are absolutely behind the protesters. This may on for a while. But again, neither Lukashenko, nor his vermin, nor officials, nor judges, they will never return to the point when there is a certain consensus that we do not like this, but it seems to be legal. Now everyone understands that yes, they have power at the expense of force, but this is absolutely illegal. Therefore, I think that now Lukashenko, together with his entire elite, which is not so much in reality, they are playing a game of who will overharden whom. Therefore, the most important task is not to leave, not to be disappointed. Do not listen to these whiners who say, "Oh, the protest was blown away. Oh, how did we not overthrow it again?" Well, it's just that it's such hard work now. But which will give a big win, a new normal life. Work is underway, but we also need to work on mistakes. What mistakes did Lukashenko and Tikhanovskaya's team make? What mistakes did Lukashenko make? It is clear which ones. He grabbed the power with his hands, teeth, he does not want to give it to anyone. Today's statement, I read it, but it just shocked me. These are the squads. Let's arm the people's squads. But this is just a real call for civil war. It is impossible to perceive in any other way. He just says just take some part of the population, give them submachine guns or fittings, and it hit another part of the population. This is a real call for civil war. And Lukashenko's mistake, besides the fact that he wants to stay in power, he really believes that it is possible to destroy the whole country and everything in the world, to deprive the future of millions of people just for the sake of one particular person to grab onto a chair and it will work. It will help him. No, it doesn't seem to work for me. As for Tikhanovskaya, she did not make any significant mistakes. It is very important to understand that there is no infallible way, these are not tests in mathematics, when there is one without errors and there is one with errors. Nobody knows how it is really necessary, and I think that both Tikhanovka and the Belarusian opposition in general. I mean, well, the basic infrastructure. This also concerns you, by the way, all the leaders. You are now in a very difficult situation because then the emotional breakthrough has passed. The time has come for hard work, everyone quarreled, everyone is without money. During the revolution and pandemic, the economic situation of countries is extremely unstable. Cryptocurrencies or Bitcoin is no longer a hype, it is the reality of today. Governments and banks control us, providing only the illusion of financial independence. While cryptocurrencies offer us real financial freedom, provided that you know how to use them. And such knowledge is completely free of charge provided by the Nominex cryptocurrency trading platform. Walk through and recommend to others 10 free lessons from Nominex on managing and trading cryptocurrencies. This is an excellent educational program for those who want to get rid of state monopolies and begin to better understand what is happening on the network with cryptocurrencies, with exchanges, and how to make money on them. This is completely different from what you will be told on TV. After easy understandable modern training, you pass the exam and get up to $500 for subsequent cryptocurrency trading. Nominex also offers a unique demo mode with the ability to trade 10,000 conditional dollars without any risks for successful training. Follow the link, register, and begin to understand, think and earn. Everyone begins to share something there, and of course this is life. It cannot happen otherwise. Therefore, the task now is not to try to analyze what mistakes were made there a second but simply in the future to try to act without these mistakes. But Tikhanovskaya does, as it seems to me, everything she can. I cannot say that I am super immersed in everything, but from what I observe, it seems to me that she does everything she can, and it is very important to support her and other leaders and in general everyone who is in leadership positions. You said that the cool thing is that there is a protest without leaders. This is a really cool thing, but it really isn't. There is no protest without a leader in Belarus. Nexta, in the organizational sense, is, of course, the leader of the Belarusian protest, one of the leaders. Tikhanovsky in prison as a leader. Tikhanovskaya. And the others are, of course, leaders. And there is no such thing as a leaderless protest, all the same, everything ultimately rests on people, and these people need to be supported by all means. Yes, this is actually very important. Nevertheless, the authorities, of course, are trying to somehow keep afloat, at least some means. To stay in OD shape. Just like today there were these people's guards, these are threats of expulsion of students. Today it is not clear whether the border was closed, or permanently or temporarily. We remember the conversation between Nick and Mike between Warsaw and Berlin, which helped you to get out of the coma. In fact, that's why the regime is to such funny and ridiculous things. Are there really no other options that are more logical, more normal for today's time in society? An initiation table? This unsuccessful trip to the pre-trial detention center did not affect anything either. Well, look, here is the same mirror situation as with the opposition. You talk about working on mistakes, what mistakes have been made. So Lukashenko, he does not understand what needs to be done. And over these 28 years, the government has gradually degraded, the people around him have degraded. And he does some pretty crazy things because he simply does not understand what to do. Here he sees that the youth, and he is now angry with all the youth. And he is, in principle, waging a large-scale war with the Belarusian people in terms of the fact that with entire generations of the Belarusian people. He announced today that he would not recognize diplomas, would not graduate, and would expel everyone. At the same time, it seems to everyone that you can somehow ideologically struggle with someone who does not share your views. But the attempt to challenge, declare war on all young people is doomed to failure just anyway. But he doesn't know what to do. He just grabbed hold of the power and also makes chaotic movements. Therefore, you just need to understand very well, it is very scary to stand at a rally. When they shoot at you with these rubber bulls, they can beat you, but everyone should understand that. These people who grabbed onto these chairs and offices are 10 times more afraid. And so they do these weird idiotic things just because they don't know what to do. I know that Lukashenko is following my activities quite closely. I think he will watch this broadcast, so if there is such an opportunity. Well, how it seems to me an unmistakable action. Alexander Grigoryevich would be the following. You need to get security guarantees from the Belarusian opposition, from Russia, from Germany, from the United States. Sign papers, declare some kind of national armistice pact. Announce new elections. And with these guarantees of safety, to cut off 20 kilometers of Belovetskaya Pushcha. Somewhere out there and to live in it. And then elect a new president, leave for Russia. Or do something else. Any other option will make it possible, perhaps, for some months. Maybe for some more years to remain in power, but everything will end much, much worse. Therefore, I still hope that this would be a OD option. But you know, it doesn't sound like a OD option to him. What should Belarusians do for us and those who help coordinate the popular movement now further? Many methods of protest have already been tried, ranging from street movements to economic ones, non-payment of communal services, attempts to recall their deputies. What to do next? How to stay toned and continue resistance. First, be honest. I am not some kind of protest science professor. If I knew what to do next, Putin would not be in Russia. Therefore, here, too, this is all such, in a certain sense, the reasoning of Pike vests. However, persistence. That is, just do not retreat. Of course, the main mechanisms now at this stage are only street protests and strikes, of course. And we saw that the combination of these two breaks absolutely any dictator sooner or later. I think that the strikes that first broke out, then they seemed to be suppressed at some time. Now they are starting again. This is where you need to invest a lot of effort. I continue to convince everyone that you cannot fire everyone. The OD thing about the strike is that it is not so scary. It's impossible to fire everyone. The worker is especially qualified. Well, if you fire him, the conveyor will stop. And in this sense there can even be a strike without declaring a strike, an Italian strike. Some common thing is called score. This is a very effective way of fighting. Because the regime will collapse in this way. But the most important thing is just belief in yourself, perseverance and Not paying attention to those people who just whine endlessly and say like the protest was blown away and so on. Do you know this classic? This is in Russia, in other countries. As soon as I see that some person begins to write, well, how can it be? The Belarusians are doing something wrong that they didn't storm the neighborhood. Well, probably, it would be a normal option to storm the Akrestino. But you need to understand that several people who will run to storm, they, in general, can get bulls. I know one thing, the law is that all people who write as radically as possible, give advice on how to storm someone in the forefront. I never see them at a real rally. In Russia, when there are arrests, detentions or something else, all such fighters never exist in real life. They only give a lot of advice on the internet. You don't need to pay attention to them. You just need to persistently move, realizing that, in principle, the Belarusian revolution is still very, very young, it is still small. A few months is a very short time to break the regime that he had been building for 28 years. He has spent 28 years building a system that cannot be broken. It was not broken in 2 months, but frankly, they did it very badly. The country is completely different. Therefore, just perseverance and faith in yourself. This is what Russian propagandists and, accordingly, the Kremlin are most afraid of: persistence, faith in oneself and the fact that if the Belarusian protests succeed, protests will begin in Russia as well. Can the Belarusian protests really become an exile for the Russian one? They are already an exile. They are already a Kremlin nightmare. They are definitely a very inspiring thing for any people in Russia. And if you know the attitude towards Ukraine and the 2 Ukrainian revolutions, once there, it still split Russian society. It seems to me that even despite all the actions of the propagandists, the attitude to what is happening in Belarus and Russia is quite unambiguous, and it seems to me that even sociology shows that, in general, Russia, the citizens of Russia are quite positive about what is happening, because after all, Lukashenko has been sitting for 28 years and looks crazier and crazier. And of course it is no coincidence that there is such a roll call constantly between Khabarovsk and Minsk during these protests. So of course yes. As I said, Putin is the Lukashenko is Putin's elder brother. And if the Belarusian people can drive away the insane older brother who breaks everything in the apartment, somewhere it is necessary to finally expel him from this apartment. Then, probably, more hopes will also arise in the apartment of the younger brother. Let's hope. In fact, we very much hope for this. That the Belarusian protests. After all, 3 years no one in Belarus would have even conducted a poll among my friends, and no one would have guessed. I confess to a shameful thing, even in the anti-corruption fund. I argued with several people whether there would be any development after Lukashenko obviously falsified the elections. And now I am ashamed to admit it. Among the skeptics, who said, well, he will just disperse everyone on the first day, beat everyone up, and that's where it's all over. And I am ashamed to admit that I thought so. But I am terribly glad I was wrong. And that is, he dispersed, he beat, but nothing ended there. It cannot be overstated. Nobody could imagine this. As you rightly say, whoever would have said 3 years that there will be protests in Minsk for 2 months in spite of rubber bulls, beatings, abductions and so on. Well, and the last question I would like on my own behalf, after all, you announced your intention to return to Russia. What can you advise me in my case? Because I can't back. As you know, there are at least 3 criminal cases already. And as far as I understand, you have suspended your YouTube channel until you return to Moscow. Is it such a direct connection that you need to be there personally? You and I, after all, have slightly different roles in your particular situation. Since you are heading together with the team, you are doing a very important infrastructure project. If you now take everything into Minsk, then all of you will be arrested and there will be no major infrastructure project. And personally, I and many other people, a million other people will not receive the news. Therefore, in your situation, returning to Minsk now is simply stupid. And everyone who says but they are from Poland, them come back. Well, that is, they are just talking nonsense. They do not understand. My situation is a little different. I'm a politician after all. And this is everyone's choice. I in no way ever condemn people who, for one reason or another, are forced to Work from migration or exile. But specifically for myself, I made my choice. I'll be back. I didn't suspend my YouTube channel. Now I'll give you an interview and live on the Bulk Life channel, which is working. It just seems very important to me to do something, in particular, to broadcast live while in Moscow. Sharing risk with people. But this is an individual situation. Can't be extrapolated. Specifically here and now, you need to sit where you are. Do your job and try to do it better, that's all. You can even be on the moon. The main thing is that the flow of news does not stop, because this is the most important thing. Well, I'll be back because my place is there. Well, I hope in the near future we will be able to meet in Minsk or Moscow freely in free countries. Thank you very much for what you are doing. Happily. And for this interview. Bye. Until. That's all for today. Thank you for watching to the end. If you want even more such videos in the future, leave your comments. Share the video with your friends and subscribe to the channel. Do not forget about the bell. See you.
Увидимся.